It is election time once again, so there's no better time to educate or refresh our knowledge about the branches of the government and what are their duties in their corresponding duties. So, the Philippine government operates within a presidential, representative, and democratic framework, with the president serving as both the head of state and the head of government. The legislative branch, executive branch, and the judiciary branch are the three separate but interrelated branches of this system. The government exercises executive power under the direction of the president. Both the administration and the two-chamber Congress, the Senate, Upper Chamber, and the House of Representatives have legislative power, the lower chamber. The courts have judicial power, with the Supreme Court of the Philippines serving as the highest judicial body. The President of the Philippines. The President of the Philippines is chosen for a 6-year term by direct popular vote. He is only eligible for one term and cannot be re-elected. After the election, the President of the Philippines begins his term at noon on June 30. The qualifications for an individual aspiring to become the President of the Philippines are outlined in Article 7, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution. According to the Constitution, an individual may become President provided he meets the following criteria. Number 1. Natural-born Filipino. Number 2. A registered voter. Number 3. Must be able to read and write. Number 4. 40 years of age at the day of the election. And 5. Must have resided in the Philippines 10 years before the election is held. A president's powers and responsibilities are as follows. Create issuances like executive orders, administrative orders, proclamations, memorandum orders, memorandum circulars, and general or special orders. Appoint heads of executive departments, ambassadors, military officials like rank colonel or naval captain, and above. Members of the Judicial and Bar Council, members of the Supreme Court and lower courts, and chairpersons of the constitutional commissions like Civil Service Commission, Commission on Elections, Commission on Audit. Appoint undersecretaries and assistant secretaries of executive departments upon the nomination of the secretary of each department. Appoint directors and assistant directors of bureau, regional and assistant regional directors, department service chiefs, or any equivalent positions as stated in the Constitution and the Administrative Code of 1987. They are Head and National Security Council. They supervise all local governments. They act as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. They suspend the privilege of the right of habeas corpus, but only to persons charged with rebellion or directly connected with invasion. They place the whole or part of the Philippines under martial law upon the approval of Congress. They grant reprieves, issue pardons, or remit fines after a judgment has been passed. They grant amnesties with the concurrence of a majority of all the members of the Congress. They contact or guarantee foreign loans on behalf of the country with the approval of the Monetary Board. They certify the necessity of the enactment of a legislative bill to meet a public calamity or emergency. They approve or veto all bills passed by Congress. They veto any item in appropriation, revenue, or tariff bill. They submit a budget or expenditures and sources of financing to Congress as a basis for the General Appropriations Bill. They address Congress before or during the opening of its regular session. They depart or decide the non-immigrant status of foreigners in the Philippines. They direct Solicitor General to acquire private property for public use. They direct the Solicitor General to acquire properties from deceased persons who have left no will and do not have any legal heirs. Lastly, they direct the Solicitor General to recover the ill-gotten wealth of public officials or employees.
The Vice President of the Philippines. The Vice President of the Philippines is elected by direct vote by the people for a term of 6 years and may run for re-election once. The term of the Vice President of the Philippines starts at noon of the 30th day of June after a regular election is held. The qualifications for aspirants to the office of the Vice President is outlined in Article 7, Section 3. According to the Constitution, the qualifications for the President is the same for the Vice President. According to the Constitution, the Vice President may concurrently assume a cabinet position should the President of the Philippines offer the former one. The Vice President will become a secretary concurrent to the position of Vice President. Aside from the cabinet post, the Vice President is mandated to assume the presidency in case of the death, disability, or resignation of the incumbent President.
Next is the Senators. The Senate is the upper house of the bicameral legislature of the Philippines. It is composed of 24 senators who are elected at large, in which the country forms one district in its elections. Under plurality at large voting, each senator serves a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. Senators serve 6-year terms with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms, with half of the senators elected in staggered elections every 3 years. Aside from having its concurrence on every bill in order to be passed for the President's signature to become a law, the Senate is the only body that can concur with treaties and can try impeachment cases. Here are the powers and duties of a senator: to create bills, resolutions, concurrent resolutions, and simple resolutions, to debate measures in respective committees and during plenary sessions, to conduct inquiries in aid of legislation, to propose or concur with amendments in the appropriation of funds by the House of Representatives, to try and decide cases of impeachment, to declare the existence of a state of war where 2/3 vote along with the House voting separately, to authorize the President to exercise powers to carry out a declared national policy for a limited period and subject to restrictions in times of war or other national emergency, to revoke or extend the President's proclamation of martial law, to concur with or reject amnesty by the President, to concur with or reject treaties or international agreements, to propose amendments to the Constitution through a Constituent Assembly or Constitutional Convention, to make full disclosure of financial and business interests and notify the Chamber of possible conflicts of interest when filing legislation of which they are authors.
Congress. The Congress of the Philippines is the bicameral legislature of the country. It consists of the Senate, the upper house, and the House of Representatives, the lower house. The Senate is composed of 24 senators, half of which are elected every 3 years. Basically, Congress is responsible for making enabling laws to make sure the spirit of the Constitution is upheld in the country, and at times amend or change the Constitution itself in order to craft laws the legislative body comes out with two main documents, bills and resolutions. This coming election, we hope that you really think about who you vote for and vote wisely.